Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation. It can sometimes be the great debate. But that depends on your calls. You're able to call me on 44208-601-4555. You call us, we'll call you back, establish a clear line, and remember, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be down at 0. You can SMS me also on 447800008066, or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk. You can even tweet me at comment_presstv. Tonight we're discussing two vital questions. The first is this: which countries show an unwillingness to take the fight to ISIL? Well, as I said to my producer just before the show, it would be much shorter to list those countries that were showing any willingness at all seriously to fight ISIL. And that's an issue that I have come to a startling conclusion about. Not being an aficionado of conspiracy theories in general, I have been resistant to embrace the idea that the Western countries who talk most about ISIL are actually helping facilitate their military victories. I really didn't want to believe that, even though I've lived long enough to know when they did in the past with similar organizations, principally in Afghanistan through the 1980s. But I have now come to a startling conclusion, and it is this: that the Western countries and their so-called coalition of the willing that are supposedly trying to crush the ISIL civil wars in Syria and in Iraq are in fact helping them. And I have many reasons to come to that conclusion. But I'll give you just one, startling or not. ISIL now controls more than 50% of Syria. Syria is the next door neighbor of Israel. Now, if Israel seriously wanted to stop ISIL taking over Damascus and capturing the rest of Syria, they would already be at the United Nations. Netanyahu would be holding up his diagrams, and they'd be shouting from the rooftops about the mortal threat that they were facing from ISIL. But they are not. As a matter of fact, they boast that they are giving medical help to ISIL fighters in the occupied Golan Heights. Israel is bombing those who are fighting against Israel, but never has sought to bomb ISIL. ISIL have never thrown as much as a stone at Israel. So I conclude that Israel does not want to stop ISIL conquering Damascus and capturing all of Syria. Now, how on earth might that be? And the United States and its so-called coalition allies are actually mounting an absolutely desultory air campaign, which actually only really sparks into life when the interests of their allies in the Kurdish movements are threatened. The only serious bombing of ISIL that has happened has been at Kobani in the Kurdish area of Syria and on Erbil on the Kurdish border with the rest of Iraq. For the rest of it, it has been, and I quote the former head of the United States Armed Forces, of a different order of magnitude to the bombardment, say, of Yugoslavia, a European country that was mercilessly bombarded by NATO forces in the 1990s. Actually, the bombardment of ISIL has been a mere fraction of the bombardment of Yugoslavia. And by comparison with, for example, Israeli bombardment of Gaza last summer, well, the Israeli bombardment was 100 times greater. So a desultory sortie or two per day hitting sand in the desert does not constitute a willingness to fight ISIL. As a matter of fact, the coalition, as the Iranian foreign minister said today, has not succeeded. I would go much, much further than that. I would say that the US-led coalition has not only not succeeded, it has been deliberately designed to fail. And what they're seeking, at the very least, is a new country as a buffer zone between Baghdad and Damascus, one which they hope will be a state that they can bend to their purposes. That's my view. Which countries show an unwillingness to fight ISIL? Just about all of them. And my second question is this: who is involved in imprisoning Palestinians? Well, again, I said to my producer before the show began, it would be much shorter to list those who are not involved in imprisoning Palestinians. What do I mean? Well, first of all, of course, Israel imprisons thousands of Palestinians in jails, in dungeons. But they imprison millions of Palestinians under occupation, annexation, or in the case of the Gaza Strip, in a state of siege. They even imprison Palestinians inside what's called the Green Line, 1948 borders, as opposed to the borders now in 2015. They imprison them as third, fourth class even, citizens inside the state that they call Israel. But they're not, of course, alone in this. President Morsi, the elected president of Egypt, is currently serving 20 years imprisonment for assisting the Palestinian resistance. Of course, he's not likely to serve the whole 20 years because they're going to hang him for breaking out of a prison run by the former dictator Hosni Mubarak. Egypt has just destroyed, and boasted about doing so, more than 500 tunnels by which the Palestinians besieged and imprisoned in the Gaza Strip managed to sustain themselves, managed to bring in the very means of life. Gaza is a prison and nothing else. Even David Cameron called it the largest open-air prison on the earth. He was seeking to avoid the term concentration camp, but that is exactly what it was. Perhaps he was seeking to avoid it because it was the British who invented concentration camps in the Boer War at the beginning of the 20th century. So actually, everybody who's not standing four square with the Palestinians and their rights is involved in imprisoning them. The United Nations, the world governments, all of them are involved in imprisoning millions of Palestinians. You tell me what you think. First caller is Mo, and he's in the UK. Mo, welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Hi, George.
Hi there. Go on, sir.
George, this question of who's not taking care of ISIL.
Yeah.
The Turkish, Saudi, and Qatari proxy forces are supplying them with weapons, but also the CIA are supplying them directly with weapons, and Israeli Arabs, Jewish Arabs, are posing as ISIL fighters and going into Syria. And these are the facts that are not being put out there for people to know about. Is that there are lots of Arab Jews who are part of this IS, so-called IS makeup.
Who are these Arab Jews of which you speak?
They work for Mossad. They're all Mossad members, and they're posing as Arab Muslims, and they're going into Syria. And they're arming the other idiot so-called IS members and telling them it's okay to carry out atrocities. Now, why do people seem to think that the ISIL forces are powerful? If you remember, George, the 2003 illegal invasion of Iraq, the Iraqi army, despite decades of training, fell within 3 weeks. They gave up the fight. Now, everyone seems to think ISIL are a powerful military force. These people can be eliminated within a couple of weeks if there was a strong willingness out there to do so. They don't want to. They want them to keep on going so they'll have a reason to invade Syria and Iraq again.
Well, the Syrian army has been fighting valiantly for 4 years against these people and had some significant military successes against them. But in the last few weeks, the tide of the battle appears to have turned. I don't think you can say that the Syrian Arab army, with all its sacrifice, has not seriously tried to fight the ISIL and Al-Qaeda and other Takfiri militias, including tens of thousands of foreign fighters who have entered their country. Equally, the Iraqi forces recaptured Tikrit recently and withstood the siege of Ramadi for quite a considerable time. So it's patchy, I think, on both of those fronts. And I'm not sure that it's fair how you have characterized it. But one thing is certain, that the Iraqi army, by the way, withstood the invasion of the world's superpowers for just 3 weeks. That's true. But the fall of Baghdad was not the beginning of the end, was merely the end of the beginning. It's not true that they ran away. They fought the occupation of Iraq until that occupation left. So I don't agree with you on those three characterizations. However, you're absolutely right to point out that an army that drives around in pickup trucks, an army which is dependent on shopkeepers and waiters and dentists and doctors and all these 25,000 or so who've come from half the countries in the world to join this ISIL international fanatic force, ought to be able to be defeated if it really was facing the United States, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, the Syrian army, the Iraqi army, and so on. They ought to be able to be defeated, and they're not. And the reason, I suspect, is that in that coalition, there's a fifth column that actually doesn't want to see them defeated. That's my thesis in the argument this evening. Mo, thanks for the call. Bani's on the line in Switzerland. Bani, welcome to the show. Go ahead.
An army which is dependent on...
no, you have to turn your television down, Bani.
Dentists and doctors.
Bani, I'll have to move on if you don't turn your TV down quickly. Yes, go ahead, sir. Bani? We appear to have lost that call. Just a swift reminder, if I may. If you have your television volume up, then you're 3 seconds behind me, and you're going to hear me speaking, or rather, I'm going to hear me speaking, and so is everyone else in the world that's watching this. So when you get through to me, the volume on your television has to be at 0. We're talking about ISIL and which countries show an unwillingness to fight them. Well, it would be much quicker to list those that are willing to fight them. Certainly the countries that are supposedly, notionally, nominally involved in a coalition against ISIL are not only not fighting them effectively, but, as an earlier caller, Mo, pointed out, are actually arming them. First of all, Saudi Arabia is where the font of all of this extremism exists. Secondly, all kinds of countries, including Britain, have supplied hundreds of millions of dollars worth of weapons and other war material to what they called moderate extremists. Well, leaving aside just how moderate these heart-eaters actually were, of course, Al-Qaeda and ISIL simply took the weapons off them. Ditto the money. Bani in Switzerland is back on the line. Bani, welcome.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Galloway.
Good evening, sir. Go ahead.
No, you said it all very clearly.
Thank you.
Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and United Arab Emirates with this Turkey, poor Turkey, they were not supporting these criminals, they wouldn't be here more than 24 hours. Now, as you said, since 2011, they have all the logistic, they have their salary, they have all these weapons, and we are surprised why. And now this is naturally, it's making a glorious moment for Mr. Israel, and all logistic and how to do it is made by the big Satan, the Pentagon and Washington. Because, there is a road between Kuwait and Iraq when they call it road of death, when it was the first war of the game war that it was with Mr. Father Bush.
Yes.
That road, they haven't left even one single equipment. Everybody has been burned and they killed them all together. How come they cannot find all these criminals, which they call them ISIL? These people, they want this force to be in Middle East and continue to destabilize all these Muslim nations. And unfortunately, they use a lot of naive Arabs for this project. Now,
well, it's a very interesting point that you make, Bani, and I myself had not forgotten it, but forgotten its significance to this argument. When the Iraqi army was withdrawing from Kuwait, on that road of death, at Mutla Ridge, they were shot in the back by the United States Air Force, and not a person was left alive. Not a piece of hardware was left undestroyed. Every vehicle was filled with dead, scorched bodies. And yet, ISIL are able to move around in an area the size of Jordan without any of these air forces meaningfully able to interdict them. So it's a very, very good point that you make, Bani, and I'm grateful to you for making it. Ramzan is in the United Kingdom. He's always worth hearing. Ramzan, welcome to the show. Ramzan, you're on the air.
Assalamu alaikum, George. How are you?
Walaikum salam. I was in Wales on Monday, and I'm back in Wales on Saturday.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Where are you visiting?
I'm
Wales?
in Merthyr.
Cardiff?
I'm speaking at the Merthyr Rising conference in Merthyr Tydfil.
Right. Merthyr Tydfil, I know very well. What time, George, please?
I'm speaking at 12 o'clock, I think.
Midday?
Yes.
Or in the evening?
Midday, midday.
Right, okay. Well, I'll give you my telephone number and address. I'll leave it with at the reception.
Okay.
And then when you pass in through Wales, my city, then you can come in and we're glad to discuss with you, George.
Inshallah.
Okay?
Yes,
Inshallah. Right, George, with people who are not sporting, well, I mean, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Turkey. Well, look what America have announced now, right? That they're going to train 500 or 5,000 people to go and fight against Syria government, right? So, I mean, basically, America is the worst cooperator in the world for terrorism.
It's very difficult. I agree. It's very difficult to understand, though, Ramzan. It's one of the reasons why I resisted this conclusion. I mean, they may hate Bashar al-Assad, and Israel does hate Bashar al-Assad.
Yes.
But why would they want ISIL in control of Syria? It's very difficult to understand that.
Shall I tell you the reason why, George?
Yeah.
Because what it is, they want to cause chaos in the Muslim world, right? Okay?
But that's going to cause chaos for the whole world.
No, it's not. I mean, they don't care. Listen, they will control them, right? Okay? But what it is, they want the Muslim Ummah to be weakened, right? Not to be united. So that is the reason why they are making these small groups of idiots, right, who don't know anything about Islam, and they're saying that they want Islamic State and all this and that. Saudi Arabia spends billions of dollars, right, promoting, right, their faith and promoting going around killing innocent people under the name of Islam, their Wahhabism, okay? So therefore, really, we don't say nothing. Look, 9/11, there was 17 Saudi Arabian citizens, right? Now, did we go after Saudi Arabia? No. Because why? We are getting cheap oil. America, all their 180 bases around the world are getting free oil from Saudi Arabia, like $4 a barrel oil. They're not going to go against that, right? So what they had to do was destroy Iraq, because Iraq was a threat, because Iraq was trying to, after Saddam Hussein, they wanted Iraq to be so weakened, right? So weakened that they can control. America got maybe 200,000 people in American embassy. Why do you need that many people for? You know, in their embassy, you have people in the embassy, maybe a couple of hundred, right? So why? They want to control these people to fight and destroy the Muslim Ummah. That's all it is, George.
Well, I'll tell you, thanks for that, Ramzan, and maybe I'll see you at the weekend. The point you made, though, that if this ISIL were to be successful, God forbid, if they were to be in control of the half of Syria they don't already control, that the West would be able to control them. If they are thinking along those lines, then they've got another think coming, because we've been here before. You see, that's the mentality that guided Western policy in Afghanistan in the 1980s. We hate the government in Kabul. We hate the Soviet Union that is supporting it. So we'll support anyone who is ready to fight it on the principle that my enemy's enemy is my friend. But your enemy's enemy isn't always your friend. Sometimes your enemy's enemy is worse than your enemy. And we found that in Afghanistan, and we'd find it again if these people were successful in Syria and Iraq. Irfan is on the line in London. Let's hear from him. Welcome, Irfan.
Hello, George.
Hello, sir. Nice to talk to you.
Again.
Yes,
I just wanted to make a couple of points regarding this. The first thing is that we need to look at the main proponent of the ideology, which allows such groups to exist, namely the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which has been, as the gentleman before me said, you know, a staunch Western ally and a key Western ally throughout most of history and or most of recent history, at least. And we know that people sacrifice, especially neocons in Western policy circles, will sacrifice all of their principles and all of their values, which they claim to advocate and sort of stand up for oil and for money and for trade and for their wealth as support. And so there has been a reluctance to tackle the main root of this ideology and the main root of the wealth for this group. And the second thing I want to say is that I'm not convinced that they are directly controlling this group, but perhaps facilitating even a bit too active a word. I would say perhaps that it's serving in their interest, and they think that this group will be malleable, you know, at some point to come, in terms of furthering their own interests. As you say, they have another thing, they strengthen that. There's also a symbolic value, I would say, that the greatest seat of Islamic civilization and learning has been bombed into the Stone Age. I mean, a lot of people criticize Saddam's rule, and rightly so. He did many bad things, but Iraq was something then, you know, in terms of the sciences, in terms of music, you know, in terms of, you know, advancement. It was something then, but the countries have now been bombed into the Stone Age. The historical past has been erased. I mean, Syria and Iraq, you know, I don't want to delve into eschatology too much, not least because I don't find it very interesting.
Sorry, we're losing that line, Irfan. You made many powerful points. I understand your reluctance to come to my conclusion. But if Israel was afraid of ISIL, they'd be bombing them. After all, they're ready to bomb anybody, anytime. But they're not bombing them. They're bombing the people who are fighting them. Now, we're talking Palestine, we're talking ISIL. I've got to take a short break for a short news bulletin. God willing, I'll still be here when you get back 3 minutes from now. Don't go away. You're watching Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. We're discussing ISIL and why so many of the so-called coalition which had been assembled to fight them isn't doing any fighting. Certainly not any successful fighting. Indeed, as the Iranian foreign minister said earlier, rather gently, I thought, they have failed. It's my view that they intended to fail and that this has all been a charade. What's your point of view? And who is involved in imprisoning the Palestinians, apart from the obvious, that is? Now let's go to Copenhagen and take the first call. Bakker. Bakker in Copenhagen, welcome.
Yeah, good evening, George.
Good evening, sir.
I saw a few days ago that you made a tweet that I absolutely agree on. And some days before that, the Iranian general slammed the U.S. for unwillingness not to fight the ISIL. And they were actually the reason for ISIL, for example, took over Ramadi. So I absolutely agree with him. And Putin also said this yesterday that the interference is responsible for ISIS is now making advance in both Syria and Iraq.
Well, so I agree with that, and we cannot understate the seriousness of the position. Ramadi is 60 miles from Baghdad, and the Takfiri fanatics have taken control of Palmyra, the jewel in the archaeological crown in the Middle East, the most perfectly preserved Roman, Greek ruins, in which they are now massacring their prisoners in cold blood. In the Roman amphitheater, just yesterday, in scenes reminiscent of the darkest days of the Roman Empire, when they used to feed Christians to the lions, people were murdered in cold blood by ISIL. ISIL now control more than 50% of Syria. That is to say, more than the government of Syria controls. And whilst it's impossible, one thinks, for ISIL to fight their way into Baghdad, they could impose a virtual partition in the country in which the outline of a new state in the third or more of Iraq that they control and the 50% of Syria that they control becomes an actual ISIL state. Of course, you wouldn't want to be a woman living in that state. You wouldn't want to be from any religious minority or any sect which the Takfiri fanatics disapproved of. So thanks for that, Bakker. Declan in Southampton, if I'm not wrong, knows a thing or two about the plight of Christians in Syria and the broader Middle East. Declan, welcome.
Hello, George. I'm just back from Syria, actually, about a week ago. But I'd like to thank you for reminding me that the USA, Turkey, and the Gulf states are fighting ISIS. Because, you know, if you hadn't reminded me, I kind of wouldn't have known, if you understand. The only people I see fighting ISIS are the Syrian army, mostly. Now, if you wheel the clock right back to 1945, 41-42, Britain was praising the Soviet Union because, the enemy of the enemy, or, the Soviet Union did the heavy lifting against Germany, right?
Yeah.
But it's the Syrian army who are doing the heavy lifting against ISIS. It's not a case that the West hates Assad or hates Syria. It's just like business, like the mafia, you see? So they need Syrian resistance, Lebanese resistance, Iranian resistance removed so that they can atomize the whole area and just have people running around like headless chickens.
Well, more and more of them are headless, of course.
Well, again, the Arabs, I say this as a compliment, they don't know, they had no idea what was coming their way, right? The Syrian army, the soldiers, the boots they're wearing, you'd get them in Poundland for, they're that bad. So the Syrian army are the heroes of the situation, but they have the forces arrayed against them are just unbelievable. Palmyra, of course, is in the middle of the desert. It could not have been attacked without the USA turning a blind eye. As regards the culture, Palmyra, the Christian culture of Malula, where they speak Aramaic, the language Jesus spoke, the NATO leaders, they don't care anything about that. Their culture is the dollar. That's where it begins and ends. As regards Saudi Arabia and culture, they're doing to Syria what they did, what they continue to do in Mecca. They destroy mosques in Mecca. They're no more Muslim than the man in the moon, right? And to say that the Western leaders care about anybody is a mistake. And your problem, George, if I may say so, and it's a problem you share with most of your listeners, is you believe these people are human, whereas, they're just NATO's leaders, Israel's leaders care nothing about humanity. That's where I see the problem. Easy for us to talk, but the people of Iraq and Syria are paying it with their blood.
What was, Declan, what was the morale like in Damascus when you were there last week?
Well, again, I was also in Yarmouk camp with the Syrian army, and, the people are hanging on, but they've had 4 years of this, right? So a lot of them, and this is Alawite Christian, the Christians in Sednaya, they're going to go down to the last bullet, right? They've beaten off ISIS 25 times, right? They will fight to the very last bullet. Similarly, a very large percentage of the people in Damascus will fight to the last bullet. But, it's 5 years of this stuff, right? And as regards being Assadist fanatics or whatever, they are the people are just the types of ordinary people that you as an MP for 30 years would have met in England. They're interested in football, women are interested in the normal type of stuff. In Yarmouk camp, I saw these lovely babies, and the women were just wincing at every mortar that came in from the moderate rebels, the so-called moderate rebels who are not moderate. They're hanging in. They've got no choice. Some of them are prepared to fight to the death. I met these Christian soldiers, as it happened, who'd been up the hills, minus 24 degrees, and they say it's their land, and to the very last bullet, they will fight. The old women in Sednaya, the very same. They will stay to the bitter end. And the people, all the people of Syria, standing behind their army, they really show how vacuous and how empty the West, the West that goes on about Palmyra, that goes on about Malula and the language Jesus spoke. They don't care a whit about it, the leaders, and nor do they care about the people, and nor do they care about the culture. The only people protecting all of that are the Syrian army, and it was the Syrian army that protected Palmyra, that protect the people, and you know, even though they've been abandoned by the West, and I actually found a large degree of irritation against Western people in general, because, you know, we're leaving them to die. The Christians in the West, they say they'll pray for them. Well, you know, what good is a little prayer in Rome or in England when you're getting your head chopped off in Syria, you see? So,
God help them, Declan. God help them. Thanks for that wonderful call. Hussein is in Bahrain. He's up next. Go ahead, Hussein. Hussein, you're on the air.
Yes, George. Good evening to you.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, I'm calling from Bahrain, as you know. And your program is based today on ISIL.
Yes.
Or supports them, and it is. I don't have to say. Everybody in the world they knows who supports the ISIL. And this is a tactic game is going on in the Middle East, and why it's remained only in Syria and Iraq, ISIL. Why it is not going furthermore?
Well, they've now taken control of one of the regions of Libya around the city of Sirte, and they are competing in others, in Benghazi and elsewhere. They've taken control of part of northern Nigeria. They're popping up elsewhere in the world too, Hussein.
I tell you, George, sorry to interrupt you. No. And Libya is a totally different case. It has not very much connected to the ISIL. Their war is between the power grab, power getting it. Whoever wants to take the power, there is money involved, oil involved, and everybody is left behind. And okay, and about the Africa, they will eventually vanish. The Boko Haram and ISIL, they will not there because there's no money, there's no oil, there's no much, and no Western ISIL is going to Africa. Totally is crossed out. It will remain in Syria, it will remain in Iraq, these two countries, and they will go on fights. But eventually, looks like that from Iraq they will be beaten. They'll go out from Iraq, and they'll remain in Syria for longer time, because Syria has got lots of borders. Turkey, Jordan, these two countries, Israel they have, and these three countries are totally supporting the ISILs. So if this will remain that, I don't know how long, until once this war is over, ISIL, this actually is a war, is over, then those supported countries, they will go also, they will lose their leaderships. So they are trying to protect their leaders through this ISIL now. They know this was the Arab Spring turned into this, and this turning will there, and this is the fight is going on. Once this ISIL will finish, then all the countries supported, they will vanish as well.
Well, Hussein, that's one perspective. It's not one that I entirely share, but I'm grateful to you for sharing it with the program and the audience this evening. We're discussing ISIL, of course, but we're also discussing Palestine, the imprisonment of the Palestinian people, the imprisonment of them in dungeons dark, the imprisonment of them in annexed Jerusalem, in occupied West Bank, and in besieged and pulverized Gaza. Israel began bombarding Gaza again just this week, though nobody noticed, because, hey, where in the Arab world is there no bombardment at the moment? The Saudis are bombarding Yemen just as savagely as Israel has bombarded Gaza. But of course, Egypt is now boasting of its role in the imprisonment of Palestinians. The closing of the tunnels which bring in the means of life into the imprisoned Gaza Strip. More than 500 tunnels in this, the world's largest open-air prison, which was a quote from David Cameron. Rahman is on the line in South Africa on that very subject. Rahman, welcome to the show.
Oh, Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Walaikum salam. Welcome. Go ahead, sir.
The sad thing is the Zionist Nazi military are committing the most evil crimes you can think of in this day and age. Yet the UN cannot even condemn it or do anything about it. The US are crying about FIFA and making a big issue. All the international media are focused on FIFA and about that journalist that has been imprisoned in Iran. But no one talks about what is happening to the poor Palestinians, the massacre of the unarmed Yemenis that are fighting with inferior weapons, and the world is just focused on FIFA. Yet the UN is run exactly like FIFA, through bribery and corruption. If you don't toe the line of the evil US, then they will cut aid from you, they won't bribe you, they won't give you water, they won't give you food, they'll stop your ships. They operate exactly like the mafia in FIFA.
Well, in fact, just this day, I think, if not yesterday, Lindsey Graham, the American senator in Israel, was warning the United Nations that the United States will stop funding them if they take any moves to blacklist Israel and to recognize a Palestinian state as a full member state of the United Nations. So you're right, Rahman. If there was a United Nations worthy of the name, then it would first of all not be headquartered in New York. It would not be allowing the United States to bully, bribe, and browbeat it into submission to United States foreign policy. And it would be speaking out loudly about the atrocities that are taking place with regard to the Palestinian people. Am I right?
You're correct. And the sad thing is, I don't blame those Zionist Nazis. I blame the Saudis and the Egyptians for doing to the Palestinians what they are doing. Because the Zionist Nazis has got a free hand given to them by the Egyptians and the pagan Saudis to do what they are doing to the poor Palestinians. And the war, I'm not even condemning, it's not condemning even what they committed, the atrocities they're committing in Yemen. They're slaughtering the people mercilessly day and night. Yet even on the South African news, the people don't even know about it.
Thousands, they're murdering thousands of people in Yemen. And it doesn't even make the television here. So I'm glad it does in South Africa. Thanks for that call, brother. Robert is in Scotland, in Peterhead. Always worth hearing him. Robert, go ahead, sir.
Good evening, George.
Good evening.
Right, so I think that the powers that are not standing up to ISIS are the ones that are actually assisting them. Turkey, for one, they were so adamant in helping the Syrian rebels during the main Syrian civil war with giving guns and weapons and supplies to the Free Syrian Army, and now they're allowing free passage between Turkey and Syria. And Israel, the Zionist regime of Israel, allowing FSA and ISIS members to use their hospitals. There are videos, there are pictures of Benjamin Netanyahu going to Israeli hospitals and shaking the hands of FSA and ISIS members as they are being treated there. So the powers that are not doing anything to help Israel, to help deal with the problem of ISIS, are actually, in a way, helping them. They're allowing free passage, they're allowing them to use their hospitals, they are backing them.
And sending them back into the battle, of course,
yes,
Robert.
Of course.
They're patching them up to send them back into the battle. Imagine. I mean, they're asking us to believe that the Zionist state is viewing its next-door neighbor being taken over by heart-eating, head-chopping, apparently Islamist, extremist fanatics, and they don't only not care about it, they're not only not complaining about it, they're assisting those very forces in the way that you describe, and also by actually bombing those from the Lebanese resistance and from the Syrian Arab army who are fighting them. Aidan is in London. Always worth a listen. Go ahead, Aidan.
Hi, George.
Hi, go ahead, sir.
If the Islamic State defeat Assad, which looks like it's going to happen, does that mean a customs union between the Islamic State and the Jewish state?
Well, you see, it may be that Israel has some kind of understanding with the leadership of ISIL. Indeed, it looks like they do. But these fanatics that are fighting for ISIL, are they likely, seriously, to declare peaceful coexistence with the Zionist state? I very much doubt that. Or will ISIL quickly mutate, as happened in Afghanistan in the 80s, into a force which eats the very people who facilitated it in the first place? Don't you think?
Yeah, well, does that mean that once ISIL have taken over, you're going to get the Turkish, American, and whoever else takeover of Syria? Is this what it's been up to now?
Well, I presume that Syria will be dismembered, that Turkey will take what it wants in the north for its own selfish reasons, and particularly its Kurdish problem. And I presume that the people loyal to the regime in Damascus will seek to have some kind of statelet in which their people are safe, and that the rest will be ruled by ISIL. I've got to go to take one more call, Aidan. It's from Iran. Vahid. Vahid, welcome. You've got 2 minutes. State your piece.
Hi, George.
Hi there. Go on, sir.
As you said, George, there is no, there is no helping hand for Syria and Iraq from outside. Syrians and Iraqis themselves are fighting ISIL. Of course, Iran is indirectly helping them. But what kind of conclusion can we reach by knowing that Turkey, Jordan, Kurds, Saudis, and Emirates, who are able to give this helping hand, are not taking any action? And also, we never can rely on the United States as well. We Iranians are seeing this unreliability of America regarding the ongoing negotiations. Why they are opposed with us having nuclear program? If we have nuclear program, we would be a power in the region. And if we are a power in the region, we could help anybody else, and that would be opposed with Americans' interests.
Well, they certainly don't want you to be a power in the region. They don't want anybody to be a power in the region. They don't want 23 Arab countries. They want 233 Arab Emirates, preferably on sectarian lines, preferably all fighting each other. Then they can sell weapons to both sides, to both sets of belligerents. You can continue this discussion on Twitter at comment_PressTV. It's been marvelous. Until next week, God willing.
Hello, just comment the name of the place you that number. And just make sure that your television volume set to 0. So 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You redirect me put through the phone number and then we'll call you back. Comment. Can I have your telephone?